The Hamptons shimmered under the golden June sun, a perfect day for what the New York Society pages had already dubbed the wedding of the decade. The sprawling oceanfront estate of the Harrington family had been transformed into a fairy tale venue, with white roses cascading from every available surface, and crystal chandeliers suspended from the massive white tent that overlooked the Atlantic. Inside the estate's grand ballroom, Olivia Reed stood before a full-length mirror, her reflection almost unrecognizable to herself. The custom Vera Wang gown hugged her slender frame, thousands of hand-sewn pearls catching the light as she turned slowly. 28 years old, and already making waves in New York's fashion industry with her sustainable luxury brand, Olivia had always imagined a more intimate ceremony, perhaps something bohemian on a beach somewhere. But when you're marrying into the Harrington dynasty, certain expectations came with the territory. "You look absolutely breathtaking," her mother Elaine whispered, carefully adjusting the cathedral-length veil. "Your father would have been so proud." The mention of her late father sent a familiar ache through Olivia's chest. Richard Reed had been gone for 5 years now, taken by a sudden illness that had left the family reeling. "I wish he could be here," Olivia said softly, squeezing her mother's hand. She could almost imagine him, tall and distinguished, ready to walk her down the aisle, his eyes crinkling with pride. "He is, darling, in all the ways that matter." Elaine dabbed at her eyes, careful not to smudge her perfectly applied makeup. As the widow of one of Boston's most respected judges, she had maintained a dignified presence in society, raising Olivia alone while expanding the Reed Family Foundation's work in education. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. "It's time," announced Caroline, Olivia's childhood friend and maid of honor, poking her head in. "And can I just say, Ethan might actually faint when he sees you." Ethan Harrington, even thinking his name brought a flutter to Olivia's stomach. They had met 3 years ago at a charity gala in Manhattan, where Olivia had been showcasing her first major collection. Ethan, with his sandy blonde hair and disarming smile, had approached her not as a Harrington, heir to one of America's largest real estate development companies, but simply as a man interested in her innovative approach to sustainable fashion. Their connection had been immediate and profound, a meeting of minds that soon blossomed into romance. Now here she was, about to become a Harrington herself, joining not just with Ethan, but with the empire his family had built across generations. An empire that her own innovative spirit would soon be a part of. "Let's not keep them waiting," Olivia said, taking a deep breath and smoothing the front of her dress. Her mother handed her the bouquet, white peonies and sprigs of lavender, simple yet elegant. As she made her way through the estate's corridors, past priceless artwork and antiques collected by the Harrington family over generations, Olivia felt a strange sense of unreality. This magnificent place would soon be part of her life, these hallways as familiar to her as the modest Boston brownstone where she'd grown up. Outside, 300 of America's elite had gathered, politicians, CEOs, celebrities, and old money families whose names adorned university buildings and hospital wings. At the altar, beneath an arch of white roses, stood Ethan, devastatingly handsome in his tailored tuxedo, flanked by his 3 groomsmen, his younger brother Jack and 2 college friends who had gone on to become business partners in Harrington Development's Sustainable Building Initiative. The string quartet began to play, and all eyes turned to Olivia. With her Uncle Thomas at her side in her father's stead, she began her walk down the aisle, her heart pounding. She caught glimpses of familiar faces, her design team beaming with pride, former professors from Parsons, friends from Boston. But her focus remained on Ethan, whose eyes had filled with tears at the sight of her. When she reached him, he took her hands in his, whispering, "You're everything I've ever wanted." Words meant only for her amid the spectacle surrounding them. Beside Ethan stood his father, Maxwell Harrington, a titan of industry whose steely exterior had softened somewhat since Olivia had entered their lives. At 70, Maxwell still commanded every room he entered, his silver hair and piercing blue eyes, so like his son's, lending him an aura of authority that had served him well in boardrooms across the country. The ceremony proceeded with the poetry and promises that had been carefully selected by both families, traditions honored, while making room for the couple's more modern sensibilities. When they exchanged rings, hers a family heirloom that had belonged to Ethan's grandmother, his a simple platinum band engraved with their initials and the date, Olivia felt the weight of history and future possibility in equal measure. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," declared the justice, a longtime family friend of the Harringtons. The crowd erupted into applause as Ethan pulled Olivia into a kiss that seemed to say everything words couldn't, that they were partners now, in every sense. The reception that followed was extravagant, yet tasteful, the kind of event that would be dissected in social columns for weeks to come. Under the massive tent, with its view of the Atlantic stretching endlessly into the horizon, the newly wedded couple made their rounds, accepting congratulations and well wishes. Champagne flowed freely, a 12-piece orchestra played, and the four-course dinner prepared by a Michelin-starred chef left guests raving. It was during the dinner that Maxwell Harrington rose to give his speech, commanding the room's attention. With a gentle tap of his crystal glass, "My dear friends and family," he began, his deep voice carrying across the silent tent. "Today marks not just the union of my son Ethan with the extraordinary Olivia Reed, but the joining of two families whose values, though expressed differently, share a common core: innovation, integrity, and a commitment to leaving this world better than we found it." Olivia felt Ethan's hand tighten around hers as his father continued, detailing the couple's accomplishments and the bright future ahead of them. Maxwell had always been somewhat intimidating to Olivia, his expectations for his son set impossibly high. Though she and Ethan had bonded partly over the pressure they both felt to live up to family legacies, Maxwell's approval had always seemed just slightly out of reach. "And so," Maxwell concluded, raising his glass higher, "it is with great pride that I announce my wedding gift to the happy couple." His eyes twinkled with rare delight. "Ethan, Olivia, I am establishing a new division of Harrington Developments, focused entirely on sustainable luxury residential projects, with you two at the helm." A murmur rippled through the crowd as Ethan's jaw dropped. Olivia felt her heart skip. This was unprecedented. Maxwell Harrington was not known for relinquishing control of any aspect of his empire, let alone creating an entirely new division. "The Harrington Reed Initiative," Maxwell continued, "will combine Ethan's architectural vision with Olivia's innovative approach to sustainable luxury. Your first project will be the redevelopment of the old Westwood property in the Berkshires, 100 acres of prime land, transformed into America's first fully sustainable luxury community." The room erupted in applause. Olivia turned to Ethan, whose expression mirrored her own shock and excitement. The Westwood property had been a contentious acquisition, with environmental groups protesting the development of the pristine land. This new direction could change everything. But as the applause continued and Maxwell approached to embrace them both, Olivia caught something in his expression, a calculated satisfaction that sent a chill down her spine, despite the warmth of the moment. It was subtle, gone almost before she registered it, but it left her with an unsettling question. Was this truly a gift born of faith in their abilities, or was there something more strategic at play? As the evening continued with dancing under the stars, Olivia pushed the thought away. Tonight was for celebration, for reveling in the love she shared with Ethan and the bright future before them. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together as they had promised just hours before. But later, as they shared their first dance as husband and wife, Ethan whispered in her ear, "Did you know about my father's gift?" "Not at all," she replied, searching his eyes. "Did you?" A shadow crossed his face. "No. And that's what worries me. My father never gives anything without expecting something in return." The orchestra played on. The guests watched with delight, and outwardly everything was perfect. But in that moment, something shifted between them, a shared understanding that their fairy tale might come with strings attached, invisible but strong, pulling them into a future that was not entirely of their own making. 3 months after the wedding, Olivia stood on the balcony of their penthouse in Manhattan's Upper East Side, watching the sunrise paint the city skyline in shades of gold and pink. She wrapped her cashmere robe tighter around herself, savoring the quiet moment before the day's demands began. Behind her, through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see Ethan still asleep, his arms stretched across her empty side of the bed. The past months had been a whirlwind of activity. The announcement of the Harrington Reed initiative had sent ripples through both the real estate and fashion worlds, with industry publications clamoring for interviews and environmental organizations cautiously optimistic about what the partnership might mean. Olivia had scaled back her direct involvement in her fashion brand, bringing in a trusted creative director to oversee day-to-day operations, while she focused on integrating her sustainable material innovations into architectural design. Ethan had thrown himself into the project with characteristic enthusiasm, spending long days in meetings with architects, environmental engineers, and local government officials in the Berkshires. The Westwood property, a former estate with shy, old-growth forest and a pristine lake, had enormous potential, but also presented significant challenges. Every decision they made would set the tone for the initiative's future. "There you are," Ethan's voice, still husky with sleep, broke through her thoughts. He joined her on the balcony, slipping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Couldn't sleep again?" Olivia leaned back against him, drawing comfort from his warmth. "Just thinking about the presentation today. There's so much riding on it." The presentation to the Harrington Developments Board would be their first formal pitch of the Westwood project's master plan. Though Maxwell had given them the division, they still needed board approval for the significant investment their vision required. "We're ready," Ethan assured her, turning her gently to face him. "The plans are solid, the financials make sense, and everyone loves your materials innovation. My father wouldn't have given us this opportunity if he didn't think we could succeed." "I know," Olivia nodded, though doubt still nagged at her. In the months since the wedding, she'd seen more of Maxwell's ruthless business acumen, the way he could charm and intimidate in equal measure to get what he wanted. "I just can't shake the feeling that there's more to your father's gift than simple generosity." Ethan's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Dad operates on multiple levels, always has. But whatever his motivations, this is our chance to make a real difference. He kissed her forehead. Together. By 9 o'clock, they were walking into Harrington Tower, a gleaming 60-story testament to Maxwell's success in Midtown Manhattan. The security guards nodded respectfully as Ethan and Olivia passed, taking the private elevator to the top-floor boardroom, where the company's power players awaited. Maxwell was already there, of course, reviewing documents with his assistant. He looked up when they entered, his sharp eyes taking in their professional attire, Ethan in a tailored charcoal suit, Olivia in a forest green dress from her own collection, made from revolutionary fabric derived from renewable sources. "Right on time," Maxwell said, rising to greet them with brief embraces. "The board is eager to see what you've come up with." There was pride in his voice, but also expectation, the tacit understanding that nothing less than excellence would be tolerated. As the boardroom filled with executives and major shareholders, Olivia felt the full weight of what they were attempting. Harrington Developments had built its reputation on luxury, not sustainability. They were proposing a fundamental shift in approach, one that would require significant investment before showing returns. When it was time, Ethan took the lead, outlining their vision with passion and precision. The Westwood development would feature homes built with sustainable materials, powered entirely by renewable energy, with architectural designs that complemented rather than dominated the natural landscape. He shared renderings that showed elegant modern structures nestled among trees, with green roofs and solar panels that somehow enhanced rather than detracted from their beauty. Then Olivia stepped forward to explain the materials innovation, fabrics, finishes and building components that reduced carbon footprint while maintaining the luxury aesthetic the Harrington brand demanded. She passed around samples, explaining technical details in accessible terms that made even the most skeptical board members lean forward with interest. "The potential applications extend far beyond the Westwood project," she concluded. "This could position Harrington Developments as the undisputed leader in sustainable luxury real estate for decades to come." There was a moment of silence when they finished, and then the questions began. Pointed, challenging, exactly what they had prepared for. Ethan and Olivia answered as a team, their responses complementing each other naturally after months of preparation. Throughout it all, Maxwell watched with an inscrutable expression, interjecting only occasionally with clarifying questions. It was impossible to tell what he was thinking until the presentation ended and he stood, buttoning his suit jacket deliberately. What my son and daughter-in-law have presented today represents the future, not just of this company, but of our industry, he said, his authoritative voice silencing the murmured discussions around the table. The numbers are ambitious but achievable, the innovation is impressive, and most importantly, he paused, looking directly at several key board members, it positions us ahead of pending environmental regulations that will soon make traditional development methods prohibitively expensive. There it was, the angle Olivia hadn't considered. Maxwell wasn't just being forward-thinking. He was being strategic, anticipating regulatory changes, and positioning the company to thrive when competitors would struggle to adapt. I move that we approve the full funding request for Phase 1 of the Westwood development, Maxwell continued, with quarterly review milestones as outlined in the proposal. The vote was unanimous in favor. As congratulations flowed, Ethan squeezed Olivia's hand, his eyes shining with triumph. "We did it," he whispered. Later that evening, Maxwell invited them to celebrate at Hudson and Vine, an exclusive restaurant where he maintained a private dining room. The space offered stunning views of the Hudson River, the city lights reflecting on the water as night fell. To new beginnings, Maxwell toasted, raising a glass of rare bourbon, and to the two of you, who might just revolutionize our industry. Olivia sipped her champagne, studying her father-in-law. "You knew about the regulations, didn't you? That's why you created the initiative." Maxwell's eyes crinkled with amusement. "Smart girl, always were, from the moment Ethan brought you home." He set down his glass. "Yes, I've had my ear to the ground in Washington. Major changes coming in building codes, carbon taxation, material sourcing requirements. Most developers will be caught flat-footed, but not us." "So this wasn't about believing in our vision," Ethan said quietly. "It was a business strategy." "It can be both, son." Maxwell leaned forward. "I do believe in your vision. I also believe in protecting what I've built. The combination makes for good business." He looked between them. "Idealism is a luxury, but pragmatism builds empires." The waiter appeared with their first course, momentarily halting the conversation. When they were alone again, Maxwell's tone softened. "There's something else we need to discuss. The Westwood project has attracted attention, not all of it. Positive. Environmental groups are suspicious of our intentions, despite your sustainable approach, and there's a local coalition forming to block the development entirely." Olivia frowned. "But we've gone above and beyond environmental requirements. Our plan preserves over 70% of the natural landscape." "It's not just about the environment," Maxwell explained. "It's about change. The locals don't want outsiders, especially wealthy ones, transforming their community. They're planning to fight the zoning permits, challenge environmental impact studies, delay us at every turn. We should meet with them," Olivia suggested immediately. "Hear their concerns, adjust our plans if necessary." Maxwell's expression suggested he had different ideas. "What we need is leverage. Every community has its pressure points, financial, struggles, infrastructure needs. Find them and opposition tends to soften." "You're talking about buying them off," Ethan said flatly. "I'm talking about negotiation," Maxwell corrected, his tone hardening. "This project is too important to be derailed by small-town politics. I've arranged a meeting with the mayor next week. He's more pragmatic than some of his constituents." Olivia and Ethan exchanged glances, the earlier triumph of their presentation, now tempered by the reality of what lay ahead. "We'll handle it our way first," Ethan said firmly, "with transparency and genuine community engagement." Maxwell shrugged, though his eyes remained sharp. "By all means. But remember what's at stake here, not just for the company, but for both of you." He took another sip of bourbon. This initiative is your proving ground. The board will be watching closely. Success here opens doors to bigger opportunities. Failure, he let the word hang in the air. The unspoken threat was clear. Maxwell had given them the opportunity, but he could just as easily take it away. As the evening continued with lighter conversation and impeccable food, Olivia found herself watching the intricate dance of power and expectation playing out before her. She had entered the Harrington world with eyes wide open, or so she'd thought, but now she understood that Maxwell's gift came with strings attached, invisible, complex, and potentially dangerous if pulled the wrong way. Later that night, as they returned to their penthouse, Ethan was unusually quiet. He moved to the bar in their living room, pouring himself a whiskey and staring out at the city lights. "What are you thinking?" Olivia asked, slipping off her heels and joining him by the window. "I'm thinking about what we're really building out there." "In the Berkshires," he replied after a moment. "Is it a sustainable community, or is it just another Harrington conquest, dressed up in green packaging?" Olivia took his hand. "It's what we make of it. Your father may have his own motives, but we still control the execution." "Do we?" Ethan's voice had an edge she rarely heard. "The board approved our plan, but they'll be watching every move, ready to step in at the first sign of trouble. And my father..." He trailed off, draining his glass. "My father never really lets go of control." "Then we prove ourselves," Olivia said with determination. "Not just to him or the board, but to ourselves. We show that business success and ethical development aren't mutually exclusive." Ethan pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I just don't want to become him, Liv. I've spent my whole life trying to measure up, and now that I have this chance..." He hesitated. "I'm afraid of what I might compromise to succeed." The vulnerability in his voice made her heart ache. Olivia had always seen Ethan as the confident one, sure of his place in the world. But now she recognized the weight he carried, the legacy of the Harrington name and all the expectations that came with it. "We'll keep each other honest," she promised, cradling his face in her hands. "Whatever happens, we face it together." As they stood there, the city glittering below them like a reflection of all they could achieve, Olivia couldn't silence the whisper of doubt in her mind. The Harrington Reed initiative was their dream, their chance to make a meaningful impact. But with Maxwell pulling strings behind the scenes, would their vision remain intact? Or would it become just another aspect of the Harrington empire where profit ultimately trumped principle? The Berkshires in autumn was a canvas of fiery colors, maples blazing red and orange, oaks in deep bronze, the afternoon sun setting the hillsides aglow. Driving along the winding road toward the small town of Sheffield, Olivia couldn't help but understand why the locals were so protective of this landscape. There was a timeless quality to it, as if the rolling hills and dense forests existed in a world apart from the chaos of city life. "It's beautiful," she said softly, gazing out the window of their Range Rover. Beside her, Ethan nodded, his hands tight on the steering wheel. "That's why we have to get this right. Not just for the business, but for the land itself." They had spent the past month meticulously preparing for this community meeting, their first direct engagement with the Sheffield residents who were increasingly vocal in their opposition to the Westwood project. Despite Maxwell's preference for behind-the-scenes negotiation, Ethan and Olivia had insisted on transparency, believing that if they could just explain their vision properly, they might win over at least some of the skeptics. The town hall was a charming colonial-era building in Sheffield's modest downtown, its white clapboard exterior and steeple a quintessential slice of New England heritage. As they parked, Olivia noticed the number of cars already filling the lot. Clearly, the entire community had turned out for this. "Ready?" Ethan asked, reaching for her hand. "As I'll ever be," she replied, smoothing her simple navy dress. They had deliberately dressed down for this meeting, avoiding anything that screamed wealthy New Yorkers. Inside, the hall was packed to capacity, the wooden pews filled with residents ranging from young families to elderly couples who had likely spent their entire lives in this region. At the front, A table had been set up with microphones, where the town council members sat alongside the mayor, a stout man named Harold Briggs, whose family had lived in Sheffield for 5 generations. Mr. and Mrs. Harrington, Mayor Briggs, greeted them with a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We appreciate you coming out to address our community's concerns directly." The tension in the room was palpable as Ethan and Olivia made their way to the 2 empty chairs at the table. Faces in the crowd ranged from openly hostile to cautiously curious. "Actually, it's Harrington Reed," Olivia corrected gently as they sat down. "I kept my name professionally." A small but important distinction. She wanted these people to see her as her own person, not merely an extension of the Harrington empire. Mayor Briggs cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, we're here to discuss the proposed development of the Westwood property. I've asked Mr. Harrington and Ms. Reed to present their plans before opening the floor to questions and concerns." Ethan stood first, his usual corporate confidence tempered with a humility that Olivia knew was genuine. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "My wife and I understand that any change to a community as special as Sheffield comes with valid concerns. We're here to listen as much as to share." For the next 20 minutes, they took turns outlining their vision. Homes that would blend with the natural environment rather than dominate it, sustainable materials and energy systems, preserved wilderness areas that would remain accessible to the public, job creation for local tradespeople, and ongoing maintenance crews. "We don't want to create an enclave of weekend homes," Olivia emphasized. "We want to build a community that enhances Sheffield, that adds value without disrupting what makes this place special." As they finished their presentation, the silence that followed was heavy with skepticism. Then a woman in her 60s stood, her weathered face set in determined lines. "I'm Eleanor Simmons. My family has farmed land adjacent to Westwood for over a century," she said, her voice clear and strong. "We've seen developers come and go, each with pretty words about respecting the land. But in the end, it's always the same. They take what they want and leave us to deal with the consequences. Higher taxes pushing out local families, water tables disrupted, wildlife displaced. Why should we believe you'll be any different?" Before they could answer, a younger man stood. "Tim Reynolds, Sheffield Historical Society. That property contains structures dating back to the 1850s. Your plans show them being repurposed. What exactly does that mean for our local heritage?" The questions continued, pointed and passionate. Concerns about traffic, property values, strain on local services, environmental impact. Some voices were angry, others simply afraid of what change might bring to their quiet community. Ethan and Olivia answered each query as honestly as they could, acknowledging when they didn't have immediate solutions and promising to address concerns in revised plans. Some responses seemed to satisfy, others clearly didn't. "The truth is," Ethan said after a particularly heated exchange about water usage, "we can make all the promises in the world today, but what matters is accountability. That's why we're proposing the formation of a community oversight committee with real power to review our progress and hold us to the commitments we make." This suggestion caused a ripple of surprise through the crowd. It wasn't something they had discussed with Maxwell or the board, a fact that Olivia knew would cause tension later. A man at the back of the room stood slowly. Unlike the others, he wore a suit, though his tie was loosened as if in concession to the rural setting. "James Whitman, representing the Berkshire Preservation Alliance," he introduced himself. "Let's cut to the chase. No matter how you dress it up, you're proposing to turn a historic wilderness area into a playground for the wealthy. The environmental impact studies you've commissioned are suspect at best, and we have serious concerns. It's about water rights that your plans gloss over entirely." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Our environmental studies were conducted by independent experts with impeccable credentials. We'd be happy to—" "Experts paid by Harrington Developments," Whitman interrupted. "Hardly independent. If you have specific concerns about the methodology," Olivia began, but Whitman cut her off too. "Ms. Reed, with all due respect, your fashion background hardly qualifies you to address the complex ecological issues at stake here. Our alliance has filed an injunction to halt any development while we conduct truly independent studies. We'll see you in court." The room erupted into a mix of applause and heated crosstalk. Mayor Briggs banged his gavel, trying to restore order. "That's enough, James. This meeting is about dialogue, not threats," he said, though Olivia noted he made no effort to refute Whitman's points. As the meeting continued, the division in Tai Timum, the room became increasingly clear. Some residents seemed genuinely interested in finding a compromise, while others were firmly opposed to any development at all. By the time Mayor Briggs finally adjourned, 3 tense hours had passed, and precious little common ground had been established. Outside, in the cool evening air, Ethan ran a hand through his hair in frustration. That could have gone better. "Actually, I think it went exactly as expected," came a familiar voice from the shadows of the town hall steps. Maxwell Harrington emerged, impeccably dressed as always, a black town car idling behind him. "Community resistance is part of the process. Now, we know where the pressure points are." Olivia stared at her father-in-law in disbelief. "You were here the whole time. Why didn't you come in? And undermine your authority? This is your project to lead," Maxwell said smoothly. "Besides, I was more useful working behind the scenes. I had a very productive lunch with Mayor Briggs earlier today." Ethan's expression hardened. "What did you do, Dad?" "Nothing underhanded, if that's what you're implying," Maxwell replied, his tone cooling. "Simply pointed out the tax benefits the development would bring, the infrastructure, improvements we'd fund, the jobs we'd create. Basic facts that seem to have gotten lost in all the emotional arguments about heritage and wildlife." "We were making connections in there," Olivia insisted. "Building trust. That takes time." "Time is money, my dear. And speaking of money," Maxwell continued, checking his watch, "that injunction Whitman mentioned could cost us millions in delays. Fortunately, I've already spoken with our legal team. We'll counterfile tomorrow." Ethan stepped closer to his father. "We agreed Olivia and I would handle this our way. And you have. Now reality requires a different approach." Maxwell's tone was final. "The car will take you to the house. We'll discuss strategy over dinner." The house was Maxwell's understatement for the sprawling estate he maintained in Lenox, about 20 minutes from Sheffield. As they drove in tense silence, Olivia watched the darkening landscape and felt the weight of what they were up against. Not just community resistance, but Maxwell's determination to do things his way. The estate was lit up against the night, staff visible through windows preparing for their arrival. It was beautiful, undeniably so, with its colonial architecture and manicured grounds. But to Olivia, it suddenly seemed like a symbol of exactly what the Sheffield residents feared, wealth imposing itself upon the landscape, reshaping it to suit its own preferences. Dinner was a stilted affair in the formal dining room, with Maxwell dominating the conversation, outlining legal strategies and political alliances he planned to leverage. Ethan grew increasingly withdrawn, while Olivia found herself speaking up more forcefully than she might have 6 months ago. "These people have legitimate concerns," she insisted, after Maxwell dismissed one community member's comments as predictable. "NIMBYism. If we steamroll them, we'll create enemies for life, not to mention betray everything the Harrington Reed Initiative is supposed to stand for." "Admirable idealism," Maxwell replied with a thin smile. "But this is business, Olivia. The project will employ hundreds, revitalize a struggling local economy, and yes, make a healthy profit. A few vocal opponents shouldn't derail all that good." "It's not just a few," Ethan finally spoke up, "and they're not just opposed to change, they're opposed to feeling powerless in the face of it. Our community oversight committee idea could actually work if we give it real authority." Maxwell set down his fork. "The board will never approve giving outsiders veto power over a multi-million-dollar investment." "Then we modify the investment," Olivia suggested. "Scale back the first phase, prove ourselves on a smaller footprint." "Absolutely not," Maxwell's voice hardened. "We've made commitments to investors based on the full scope. Scaling back sends a message of weakness and uncertainty." The conversation circled back and forth, with neither side willing to concede. By the time they moved to Maxwell's study for brandy, The gulf between their approaches seemed insurmountable. A whine. Maxwell took a call in the corner. Ethan moved to the fireplace, staring into the flames. Olivia joined him, placing a hand on his arm. "We're losing control of this," he said quietly. "Everything we wanted to achieve is being overshadowed by the old Harrington playbook: leverage, pressure, litigation. Then we fight for our vision," Olivia urged. "Your father may control the company, but this initiative has our names on it. We have to stand our ground." Ethan turned to her, his eyes troubled. "It's not that simple, Liv. The company has been my life, my future, since I was old enough to understand what my father built. If we push too hard—" "What?" "He'll take it away," Olivia challenged. "Is that the price of being a Harrington, absolute obedience?" "You don't understand." "What don't I understand?" "That your father's approval matters more than doing what's right." The words hung between them, sharp-edged and dangerous. Before Ethan could respond, Maxwell returned, oblivious to the tension he'd interrupted. "That was our contact at the county zoning commission," he announced triumphantly. "They're prepared to fast-track our permits, Whitman's injunction notwithstanding. Let me guess, in exchange for a generous donation to the county development fund?" Ethan's voice was flat. Maxwell's eyes narrowed. "It's called being a good corporate citizen. The fund supports essential services." "It's called buying influence," Olivia said quietly. Maxwell turned to her, his expression cooling. "I've been patient with your idealism, Olivia, because Ethan believes in you and I believe in him. But make no mistake, this project will proceed. The only question is whether you two will lead it my way, or whether I'll need to bring in management more aligned with company priorities." The threat was no longer veiled. Ethan stepped forward, positioning himself between his father and Olivia. "We need time to consider our approach," he said with forced calm. "The community meeting gave us a lot to think about." Maxwell studied his son for a long moment. "Take the night. We'll reconvene in the morning." His tone made it clear he expected their resistance to fade with sleep. "The guest suite is prepared for you both." After Maxwell retired to his wing of the house, Olivia and Ethan retreated to the luxurious guest suite, its elegant furnishings doing little to ease the tension between them. As Olivia sat at the vanity removing her earrings, she caught Ethan's reflection in the mirror. His shoulders slumped as he stared out the window into the darkness. "We can't let him dictate this," she said softly. "If we give in now, the Harrington Reed initiative becomes just another corporate greenwashing project." Ethan turned, his expression pained. "You say that like it's simple, like we just tell my father no and everything works out." "You don't know him like I do, Liv. He doesn't accept defiance, not from anyone, and especially not from family. So we're supposed to abandon our principles because standing up for them is hard," Olivia challenged, rising to face him. "That's not the man I married. And living in some fantasy world where ethics don't have consequences isn't the woman I married," Ethan shot back, immediately regretting his words as hurt flashed across Olivia's face. "Is that what you think this is? A fantasy?" Her voice was quiet but intense. "I built my brand on the belief that luxury and sustainability aren't mutually exclusive. I turned down countless offers that would have compromised that vision. And I thought you shared it." "I do," Ethan insisted, crossing to take her hands. "But I also understand the reality we're operating in. My father built this company through sheer force of will. He won't hesitate to replace us if we push too hard against him." "Then maybe we should let him," Olivia said, the words falling between them like stones. "Maybe preserving what we believe in matters more than preserving our place in the Harrington hierarchy." Winter descended on the Berkshires with unforgiving swiftness, blanketing the contested Westwood property in pristine snow that glittered under the December sun. Standing at the edge of the frozen lake, Olivia pulled her coat tighter against the chill, watching her breath form clouds in the frigid air. The beauty of this place still took her breath away, even after months of conflict and compromise. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Ethan approached from behind, offering a thermos of coffee. His face was leaner than it had been in summer, new lines etched around his eyes from the strain of the past months. "Just wondering if we'll ever break ground," Olivia answered, accepting the warm thermos gratefully. "Or if we'll still be fighting legal battles when we're old and grey." The last 4 months had been a constant tug-of-war. After that fateful night at Maxwell's estate, they had presented a unified front, insisting on modifications to the development plan that would address community concerns. Maxwell had grudgingly allowed some changes, reducing the number of home sites, expanding the conservation area, committing to hire local labor, but behind the scenes, he continued his aggressive legal and political maneuvering. James Whitman's injunction had been temporarily lifted, then reinstated, then modified through a series of court hearings. The Berkshire Preservation Alliance had rallied supporters from across the region, staging protests at Harrington Development's offices and generating negative press that had begun to affect the company's stock price. "The judge should rule on the environmental impact study next week," Ethan said, gazing out across the frozen expanse. "If it goes our way, we can finally move forward with Phase 1. The modified Phase 1 was now limited to just 20 homes in the community center, a far cry from the original ambitious plan. It was a compromise that satisfied neither Maxwell nor the project's strongest opponents, but it was the best they had been able to negotiate. "And if it doesn't go our way?" Olivia asked, the question that had hung between them for weeks. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then my father will probably pull the plug entirely. The board's patience is wearing thin." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of potential failure heavy between them. The Harrington Reed initiative had become a lightning rod, drawing attention from environmental groups, business publications, and even national media. What had begun as a vision for innovative, sustainable development had devolved into a case study in corporate community conflict. "Come on," Ethan said finally, taking her hand. "We'll be late for the meeting." They had established a small office in Sheffield, a deliberate choice to maintain a presence in the community, even as the legal battles raged. The space was modest, a converted storefront on Main Street with the large windows that Olivia had filled with displays of sustainable building materials and architectural models, showing their evolving plans. Inside, their small but dedicated team was already assembled. Mia Chen, the brilliant environmental engineer they had poached from a prestigious firm in Boston, was reviewing water management plans with Casey Thompson, their community liaison who had grown up in Sheffield and provided invaluable insight into local concerns. "Morning all," Ethan greeted them, shrugging off his coat. "Any updates?" Casey nodded, her expression serious. "Eleanor Simmons called. The Farmers Coalition wants to meet again. They're concerned about the latest water rights filings." Olivia sighed. The water rights issue had become increasingly contentious, with Maxwell pushing for allocations that would ensure lush landscaping for the development, while local farmers worried about the impact on their agricultural operations. "Set it up as soon as possible," she instructed. "And make sure we have the updated hydrologist's report ready to share." The morning progressed with the now familiar rhythm of problem-solving and negotiation. By lunchtime, Olivia was deep in conversation with their sustainable materials supplier when her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan, "Emergency call with Dad and the board. Come upstairs ASAP." The tension in the small conference room was palpable when Olivia entered. Ethan sat at the head of the table, his laptop open to a video call where Maxwell and several board members were visible, their expressions grave. "Ah, Olivia." "Good," Maxwell said, his voice tinny through the speakers. "We were just discussing a significant development." "What's happened?" she asked, taking a seat beside Ethan, who reached for her hand under the table, his grip tight. "James Whitman has gone public with allegations that Harrington Development's falsified water usage projections in our environmental impact studies," Maxwell explained, his calm demeanor belied by the tight set of his jaw. "It's headline news on several environmental websites, and the mainstream media is picking it up fast." Olivia's stomach dropped. "That's impossible. Mia's team has been meticulous with their projections. The allegations specifically referenced data from before your team took over," one of the board members interjected. from the preliminary studies commissioned last year. Before the Harrington-Reed initiative had even been announced. Before their wedding. "Is there any truth to it?" Ethan asked, his voice carefully controlled. A weighted silence filled the connection. Maxwell's expression remained impassive, but Olivia saw something flicker in his eyes. Calculation, not denial. "The initial projections may have been optimistic," he admitted finally. "Standard practice in the early phases of assessment. Optimistic or deliberately misleading?" Ethan pressed, color rising in his cheeks. "Watch your tone, son," Maxwell warned. "The point is, this PR crisis needs immediate management. The board has convened an emergency session to discuss our options." Another board member, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes, leaned forward. "We're considering two paths forward. Either we fight these allegations aggressively, challenging Whitman's credibility and the methodology of his analysis, or, Olivia prompted when the woman hesitated. "Or we announce a strategic withdrawal from the Westwood project, citing community considerations while we evaluate other opportunities for the Harrington-Reed initiative elsewhere." Cut and run, abandon months of work, relationships built, trust slowly earned with at least some segments of the community. Olivia felt her heart sink even as her resolve hardened. "There's a third option," she said firmly. "We acknowledge any errors in the preliminary studies, present our updated and accurate projections, and demonstrate our commitment to absolute transparency moving forward." Maxwell's laugh was short and dismissive. "Admitting wrongdoing invites litigation and damages our reputation irreparably. Hiding wrongdoing guarantees both," Ethan countered, "just delayed, and it destroys any credibility the initiative has." Built. The disagreement escalated with board members split on the approach. Some backed Maxwell's aggressive defense strategy, others saw the value in a dignified withdrawal, but none supported Ethan and Olivia's call for transparency and accountability. "We'll put it to a formal vote this evening," Maxwell finally declared. "In the meantime, all public statements are frozen. No one speaks to press, community members, or even staff about these allegations until our strategy is finalized." After the call ended, Ethan slammed his laptop closed, his face flushed with anger. He knew. He's known all along that those initial studies were manipulated. "Do you think he did it deliberately?" Olivia asked. "To fast-track approval before anyone could raise objections?" "It's his standard playbook," Ethan confirmed, running a hand through his hair. "Get in the door any way you can, then deal with complications later. I just never thought he'd do it with this project. Not when he knew how much it meant to us." Olivia paced the small room, her mind racing. "If the board votes to deny or withdraw, everything we've worked for is compromised. Not just the project, but what it stands for." "They'll never vote for full disclosure," Ethan said, grimly. "The potential liability is too great." A knock at the door interrupted them. Casey stood there, her expression concerned. "Sorry to intrude, but there's someone here you should meet. Says he has information about the water projections." The man who entered behind her was vaguely familiar, middle-aged, with salt and pepper, hair and the weathered look of someone who spent significant time outdoors. It took Olivia a moment to place him from the community meetings. "David Reeves," he introduced himself. "I was the field technician on the original environmental survey team for Westwood, contracted through Ecosystems Analysis." Ethan straightened. "You worked on the water projections?" "I collected the raw data," Reeves confirmed. "Soil samples, water table measurements, runoff patterns. My team provided accurate information. What happened to that data afterward?" He shrugged. "Well, that's why I'm here." Over the next hour, Reeves laid out a disturbing picture. His team's findings had indicated potential issues with water availability for the scale of development initially proposed. Those findings had been submitted to Harrington Developments, but when the environmental impact statement was published, the projections had been significantly altered. "I raised concerns internally," Reeves explained. "Was told it wasn't my place to question the final analysis. When I persisted, my contract was terminated." "Do you have documentation?" Olivia asked, her heart racing with the implications. Reeves nodded, pulling a flash drive from his pocket. "Copies of our original field reports, emails expressing my concerns, the final altered projections as they appeared in the impact statement. I kept it all as insurance. "Why come forward now?" Ethan asked, studying the man carefully. "Because your initiative seemed different," Reeves said simply. "You've been talking about real sustainability, not just lip service. And frankly, Whitman's allegations are close, but not entirely accurate. I wanted you to have the full picture before you respond." After Reeves left, promising to remain available if they needed further information, Ethan and Olivia sat in stunned silence, the flash drive between them like a live grenade. "If we use this," Olivia said finally, "we're declaring war on your father and probably the board. If we don't," Ethan countered, "we're complicit in exactly the kind of corporate behavior we wanted to change." The decision crystallized between them, unspoken but mutually understood. There would be no turning back from this moment, no compromise that could bridge the chasm that had opened before them. Ethan reached for his phone, dialing a number he rarely used. "Rebecca, it's Ethan Harrington. I need to meet with you immediately." "It's about Westwood." He paused, listening. "Yes, on the record." Rebecca Chen was an environmental journalist whose coverage of the Westwood controversy had been thorough and fair, critical of Harrington developments, but also acknowledging the potential benefits of the modified proposal. As Ethan arranged the meeting, Olivia's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Maxwell. She showed the screen to Ethan, who nodded grimly. "He probably got an alert when Reeves signed in at reception," he said. "You don't have to answer." But Olivia knew ignoring Maxwell would only delay the inevitable confrontation. She accepted the call, putting it on speaker. "Olivia," Maxwell's voice was dangerously calm, "I understand you and Ethan have a visitor with some interesting history with the company. How did you—" "I make it my business to know what happens. In my company," he cut her off. "Whatever Reeves has told you, he's a disgruntled former contractor with an axe to grind. His allegations were investigated and dismissed years ago." "Were they investigated, Maxwell? Or were they buried?" Olivia challenged, meeting Ethan's gaze across the table. "Because the documentation we've seen is pretty compelling." A beat of silence, then Maxwell's tone hardened. "Don't do something you'll regret, Olivia. You too, Ethan, I know you're listening. There are proper channels for addressing concerns about company practices. Like the board meeting tonight, where you'll push through a decision to either deny everything or abandon the project entirely," Ethan interjected. "Those aren't the proper channels we're interested in." "Think carefully about your next move," Maxwell warned. "Your positions, your futures with the company, the entire Harrington Reed initiative, all of it hangs in the balance." "No, Dad," Ethan said with quiet determination. "What hangs in the balance is the difference between the company you built and the company it could become, between perpetuating a broken system and helping to fix it." "Don't be naive." "Goodbye, Maxwell," Olivia interrupted, her finger hovering over the end call button. "We'll be in touch after we've met with the press." She disconnected before he could respond, the silence in the small conference room profound in the call's absence. "Well," Ethan said after a moment, a strange mix of dread and relief in his voice, "I guess we just burned that bridge." Olivia reached across the table for his hand. "Maybe. Or maybe we're finally building the kind of bridge that can actually take us where we want to go." As they gathered their materials and prepared to meet Rebecca Chen, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing at a precipice. Behind them lay the security of the Harrington Empire, with all its power and privilege. Before them stretched an uncertain future, one where their principles would be tested against the harsh realities of business and personal cost. Spring came late to the Berkshires that year, as if the land itself had been holding its breath through the tumultuous winter. When the thaw finally arrived in April, it brought with it a sense of renewal that seemed almost too perfectly symbolic for Olivia, as she stood on the hillside overlooking what would soon become the first true Harrington Reed community. Below her, construction crews were preparing the foundations for the model home, the first tangible evidence that their vision was becoming reality, despite everything that had tried to prevent it. The months since their confrontation with Guy, Maxwell had been the most challenging of her life, but standing here now, watching their plans take physical form, she couldn't help but feel it had all been worth it. Admiring our handiwork, Eleanor Simmons approached, using her walking stick to navigate the uneven ground. The elderly farmer had become an unlikely ally in the revamped project, her practical wisdom and deep knowledge of the land proving invaluable. "Still can't quite believe we made it this far," Olivia admitted, making room for Eleanor on the weathered bench they'd placed at this strategic overlook. "Didn't think you'd stick it out when the lawsuits started flying," Eleanor said with characteristic bluntness. "Most city folks would have cut their losses." Olivia smiled, remembering the chaos that had followed their meeting with Rebecca Chen. The article had broken like a thunderclap. Harrington heirs blow whistle on company's environmental deception, sending shockwaves through the business world and igniting a firestorm within Harrington Developments. Maxwell's fury had been cold and calculating. Within hours, he had convened an emergency board meeting where Ethan and Olivia were stripped of their positions and the Harrington Reed initiative was formally dissolved. By the end of the week, they had been locked out of company systems, removed from their offices, and publicly disavowed in a press release that described their actions as a regrettable breach of company protocol by inexperienced executives. "Good thing we're not most city folks," Olivia replied to Eleanor, "and good thing we had help." That help had come from unexpected quarters. The most surprising ally had emerged in Jack Harrington, Ethan's younger brother, who had been working in the company's international division. To everyone's shock, including Ethan's, Jack had resigned his position in solidarity, publicly backing their disclosure and bringing with him several key executives who shared his concerns about the company's direction. More support had materialized from Olivia's network in the sustainable business community. Former clients, suppliers, and industry colleagues rallied around them, offering resources and connections that proved crucial in the weeks that followed. Her mother, Elaine, had not only provided emotional support, but had leveraged the Reed family Foundation's considerable influence to keep doors open that might otherwise have closed. But perhaps the most significant assistance had come from within Sheffield itself. After the truth about the water projections emerged, community sentiment had begun to shift. Not everyone became supporters overnight, but a growing contingent recognized that Ethan and Olivia had sacrificed their positions to do the right thing, and were willing to give their revised vision a fair hearing. "Speaking of help," Eleanor said, nodding toward the access road where a dusty pickup truck was making its approach, "here comes your better half with our problem solver." Ethan parked the truck at the edge of the clearing and helped his passenger navigate the muddy ground. Casey Thompson, now the project's official community liaison and an essential bridge between the development team and local residents. "Good news," Ethan called as they approached, his face lighting up at the sight of Olivia in a way that still made her heart skip, even after everything they'd been through. "The county approved the revised water management system. We can proceed with the full 20 units in Phase 1. And," Casey added, her enthusiasm bubbling over, "the town council voted to formally endorse the revised community center plans, including the local business incubator space." Olivia felt a wave of satisfaction. The community center had become the heart of their reimagined project, not just an amenity for residents, but a genuine resource for Sheffield, with meeting spaces, educational facilities, and dedicated areas for local entrepreneurs to showcase their products and services. "James Whitman will still find something to complain about," Eleanor predicted, though her tone lacked real concern. "Probably," Ethan agreed with a rueful smile, but even he had to admit the new water management system exceeds ecological standards. The relationship with Whitman and the Berkshire Preservation Alliance had evolved into something resembling reluctant respect. They remained watchdogs, scrutinizing every aspect of the development, but their opposition had become more constructive than obstructive as the project's genuine commitment to sustainability became evident. As they discussed the latest updates, Olivia's phone buzzed with a notification. "The investor's call is in 30 minutes, she reminded Ethan. "We should head back to the office." Their office was now the renovated carriage house behind the Victorian home they'd purchased in Sheffield, a far cry from the Manhattan penthouse they'd left behind, but one that had become a true home in ways the sleek city apartment never quite managed. After bidding goodbye to Eleanor and Casey, they drove the winding road back to town, the truck's windows open to the sweet spring air. Ethan reached across the console to take Olivia's hand, a habit that had become more frequent in recent months, as if the connection between them needed constant reaffirmation after being tested so severely. "Nervous about the call?" he asked. "A little," she admitted. "This is the largest round we've attempted." The funding of their new venture, now called Reed Harrington Sustainable Communities, had been perhaps their greatest challenge. After leaving Harrington Developments, they had invested much of their personal wealth to acquire the Westwood property, which Maxwell had surprisingly decided to sell rather than develop himself. Industry rumors suggested the company had been facing increased scrutiny from regulators and investors following the scandal, making a clean break the most pragmatic option. But personal funds only stretched so far, and bringing their vision to life required substantial capital. Traditional investors had been wary at first, concerned about backing a project with such a contentious history, and led by executives who had publicly broken with one of the country's most powerful developers. Salvation had come in the form of impact investors, individuals and funds specifically seeking projects with strong environmental and social returns alongside financial ones. Today's call was with a consortium that could potentially fund not just the completion of Westwood, but the acquisition of 2 additional properties for future development. Back at the carriage house, they found Jack already setting up for the video conference, his tie slightly askew as always, despite his otherwise impeccable appearance. After leaving Harrington Developments, Jack had joined their fledgling company as financial director, bringing with him a strategic mind and connections that had proven invaluable. "They're already logged in," he informed them, adjusting the camera. Eager beavers. Ethan squeezed Olivia's hand once more before they composed themselves for the call. Over the next hour, they presented their vision with the passion and precision that had become their hallmark, not just the architectural plans and sustainability metrics, but the community integration elements that set their approach apart. "We're not just building homes," Olivia emphasized as she shared images of their model unit under construction. "We're creating a blueprint for how development can actually enhance rather than exploit natural environments, how luxury and responsibility can coexist, and how new communities can integrate with existing ones to everyone's benefit." When the call ended with a tentative commitment for the full funding amount, pending final due diligence, the 3 of them sat in stunned silence for a moment before Jack broke into a grin. "I think this calls for a celebration," he declared, pulling a bottle of champagne from the small refrigerator they kept in the office. "To new beginnings, again." As they toasted their success, Olivia's phone buzzed with an incoming text. She checked it discreetly, her expression shifting as she read the message. "Everything okay?" Ethan asked, noting her change in demeanor. "It's from Caroline," Olivia said slowly, referring to her old friend and former maid of honor. "She says, there's a profile of us in tomorrow's New York Times business section. Apparently Maxwell was interviewed." The mood in the room sobered instantly. Maxwell had maintained a rigid silence about them publicly since the initial press release, focusing instead on aggressive damage control for Harrington Developments. They had heard through industry contacts that he considered their actions a personal betrayal beyond forgiveness, a sentiment he had reinforced by refusing all attempts at communication, even through intermediaries. "Did she say what he said about us?" Jack asked, his relationship with his father even more complicated since his decision to join his brother's new venture. "Just that we should brace ourselves," Olivia replied, "but also that most of the article is very positive about what we're building here." Ethan set down his glass, his expression thoughtful rather than anxious. "Whatever he said, it doesn't change what we've accomplished." The next morning, they gathered around Olivia's laptop to read the article together. Titled "From Corporate Heirs to Environmental Pioneers," it was indeed largely positive, detailing their journey from Harrington Developments executives to independent developers challenging industry norms. Maxwell's comments came near the end. Maxwell Harrington, speaking publicly about his son and daughter-in-law for the first time since their departure from Harrington Developments, was measured in his assessment. "Ethan and Olivia chose a different path than I would have," he told this reporter. While I disagree with their methods, time will be the ultimate judge of their vision. The Harrington name has always stood for excellence, if they maintain. To that standard in their new venture, I can only wish them success. That's almost conciliatory, Jack said, sounding stunned. For Dad, it's practically a peace offering, Ethan agreed, though his expression remained guarded. Olivia read between the lines, seeing both the pride Maxwell couldn't fully suppress and the challenge embedded in his words. The Harrington legacy still mattered to him, and by extension what they did with the name they carried still reflected on him. I think he's finally realized we're not coming back, she said. That this isn't a phase or a negotiating tactic. We've built something real here, something that stands on its own merits. Later that afternoon, they walked together through the partially constructed model home, its wooden frame now complete, and the innovative sustainable systems beginning to take shape. The design seamlessly blended with the natural surroundings while incorporating cutting-edge technology. Solar glass in place of traditional windows, a living roof system that would collect rainwater for reuse, walls built with sustainable materials. That included elements from Olivia's fashion innovations. Remember when this was just sketches and dreams? Ethan asked as they stood in what would become the great room, its wall of windows framing a view of the pristine forest they had fought to preserve. Sometimes, I still can't believe we walked away from everything, Olivia admitted. The security, the resources, the Harrington name opening every door. Do you regret it? Ethan asked quietly, the question they rarely voiced aloud. Olivia considered for a moment, thinking about all they had sacrificed and all they had gained. The past year had stripped away pretenses and distractions, forcing them to decide what truly mattered, not just in business, but in their marriage. The pressure had nearly broken them at times, arguments flaring as stress mounted and resources dwindled, but each crisis had ultimately brought them closer, their shared values proving stronger than the external forces pulling them apart. Not for a second, she answered honestly. What about you? Your father's almost approval must mean something. Ethan's smile was complicated, a mix of lingering hurt and hard-won peace. It does, but not as much as this. He gestured around them, at the physical manifestation of their shared vision. Not as much as what we're building together. As the afternoon sun filtered through the unfinished windows, casting patterns across the raw wooden floors, Olivia was struck by how different their lives had become from the glamorous existence they'd once led. The society pages no longer tracked their appearances at galas and benefits. Their circle of friends had transformed, now centered on relationships built on genuine connection rather than strategic advantage. And yet, for all they had left behind, what stretched before them felt infinitely more valuable, a future defined by their own choices rather than expectations imposed by others. There's something I've been waiting to tell you, Olivia said, taking Ethan's hands in hers. I wanted to be sure before I said anything. Ethan's expression grew concerned. Is everything okay? More than okay, she assured him, a smile spreading across her face. Our family is expanding, and not just the business. Understanding dawned in his eyes, joy replacing worry as he pulled her close. Are you sure? Confirmed yesterday, she nodded, tears of happiness threatening. Perfect timing, really. By the time the baby arrives, the model home will be complete, our first resident for our first finished project. Ethan laughed, the sound echoing through the unfinished space, transforming it from a construction site to the beginning of a home. My father always said the Harrington legacy was about building things that last, he said, placing a gentle hand on Olivia's still flat stomach. I don't think this is what he had in mind, but it's the most meaningful foundation we could possibly. As they stood together in the golden light, surrounded by the physical framework of their reimagined dream, Olivia felt a sense of completion that transcended the professional victory they had achieved. The true success wasn't in the buildings rising around them, or even in the sustainable practices they were pioneering, but in the courage they had found to define success on their own terms, to build a life and legacy authentic to who they were and what they believed. Outside, the land that had been the battleground for so much conflict now rested peaceful in the spring sunshine, its natural beauty preserved while still making room for thoughtful human presence. Like their relationship, like the community they were creating, it represented the delicate balance between honoring what exists and making space for something new to grow, a balance that required vigilance, compromise, and unwavering commitment to core principles. "Ready to show our little one how to change the world?" Ethan asked, his arm around her shoulders as they prepared to leave the site for the day. Olivia leaned into him, feeling the strength they had forged through adversity, the partnership that had survived being tested in ways they could never have imagined on that perfect wedding day almost 2 years ago. One sustainable community at a time, she agreed, stepping with him into the sunlight, toward a future they had risked everything to build, together. Fim da Historia. Listeners, we hope Olivia and Ethan's journey has touched your heart as they found their way to building not just sustainable homes, but a life based on authentic values. For more emotional stories that explore the complexities of love, family, and finding your true path, we've created a special playlist of equally captivating narratives. Find it by clicking to your left. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Every day we bring you unique stories that explore life's challenges and triumphs. Don't miss our upcoming content, and we look forward to reading your thoughts in the comments.